Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. "Happy birthday, Mom," Silana chirped, her voice a little too bright, a little too eager. She thrust a package wrapped in glossy paper towards me. "I know how much you appreciate a good whiskey." Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, a detail I'd started noticing more and more lately. I accepted the gift, a heavy bottle clinking softly inside. "Oh, you shouldn't have," I said, genuinely surprised. Silana and I had never been particularly close. Polite, yes, but a genuine warmth had always seemed to elude us. "It's nothing," she replied, waving a dismissive hand. "Just a small token of my appreciation." "Appreciation for what, dear?" I asked, carefully peeling back the wrapping. The bottle nestled inside was a deep amber, the label proclaiming it a rare, aged single malt. My eyebrows raised. This was no ordinary supermarket whiskey. This was something special, something expensive. "For everything you do," Silana said vaguely, her gaze flitting round the room. "For being such a wonderful mother-in-law." Her voice was strained, the words sounding rehearsed. "Masha's helped me pick it out," she added, as if that somehow explained everything. "Well, it's certainly thoughtful," I said, turning the bottle in my hands, admiring the intricate label. I'd never seen Masha's drink anything other than cheap beer, so the idea of him selecting this particular bottle seemed odd. "I look forward to trying it." A small, nagging feeling of unease prickled at the back of my mind. "You should open it now," Silana urged, a touch too quickly. "We can celebrate together." She glanced at the clock on the wall. "Actually," she backtracked, "I have to run. Julian needs me to pick something up for him." "Oh, of course," I said, slightly disappointed. "Give him my best." "I will," Silana promised, already halfway to the door. "Enjoy your whiskey," she called over her shoulder before disappearing out the door. I stood there for a moment, holding the heavy bottle in my hands, the unease growing. Why did her eagerness feel so forced? Why the sudden rush to leave? I shrugged it off, deciding I was being overly suspicious. It was my birthday. After all, I deserved a little treat. I found a couple of glasses and poured myself a generous measure of the amber liquid. It swirled in the glass, releasing a complex aroma of oak and spice. I raised the glass to my lips and took a sip. The whiskey was smooth, with a warm, lingering finish. It was indeed excellent. I poured myself another glass, enjoying the quiet of the morning. As I savored the second drink, my thoughts drifted to Masha's and Silana. They'd been married for almost a year now, and while they seemed happy enough, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Masha's had been acting strangely lately, distant and preoccupied. He'd been avoiding my calls, making excuses whenever I invited them over for dinner. And then there was the matter of their finances. They both worked, but they seemed to be struggling. I'd offered to help them out a few times, but they'd always refused, their pride getting in the way. The whiskey warmed me from the inside out, loosening the knot of worry in my stomach. I poured a third glass, thinking about the future. I had worked hard my whole life, building my business from the ground up. I had a beautiful home, a comfortable nest egg, and a few prized possessions, like my grandmother's gold watch. I wanted to share my good fortune with my children. to ensure they were secure, but I also wanted to make sure they were responsible, that they wouldn't squander what I had worked so hard to achieve. As I finished the third glass, a wave of dizziness washed over me. My head spun, and my vision blurred. I clutched the edge of the counter, my heart pounding in my chest. Something was wrong, very wrong. The room started to tilt, the walls seeming to close in on me. I stumbled towards the phone, my hands shaking as I dialed 911. Help, I gasped into the receiver, my voice barely a whisper. I think I've been poisoned. The world went black. I woke up in a hospital bed, hooked up to machines, a throbbing pain in my head. A nurse hovered over me, her face etched with concern. "You're lucky to be alive, Mrs. Lydia," she said, her voice gentle. "The paramedics said you were barely breathing when they arrived." "Poison," I croaked, the word catching in my throat. "The whiskey," the nurse nodded grimly. "The doctors are running tests. They'll know more soon." I closed my eyes, my mind reeling. Who would want to poison me? And why? The image of Silana's forced smile, her hasty departure, flashed through my mind. The nagging feeling of unease returned, stronger than ever. Could it have been her? Could she have poisoned the whiskey? The thought was almost too horrifying to contemplate, but the more I thought about it, the more it made a terrifying kind of sense. Silana's sudden appreciation, the expensive whiskey, Matias's strange behavior, it all pointed to something sinister. I opened my eyes, a new resolve hardening in my gaze. I would get to the bottom of this. I would find out who poisoned me and why, and I would make them pay. The phone rang, shrill and insistent, cutting through the quiet of my evening. It was Silana. "Did you enjoy your gift?" she asked, her voice saccharine sweet. My stomach churned. "The whiskey," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. "Yes, the special one," she purred. "Julian picked it out himself." A wave of nausea washed over me. I'd barely touched the bottle, pouring just a small amount into a glass for myself earlier. The taste had been off, metallic, almost. I'd dismissed it as my imagination, but now Silana's call felt ominous. "It's interesting," I managed, my hand tightening around the phone. "You sound strained, Lydia. Is everything all right?" she pressed. "Just tired," I lied, forcing a light laugh. "It's been a long day," Silana continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You know, Julian's been worried about you buying baloney in that big house." Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. I knew what she was implying, that I was old, frail, a burden, that I needed looking after. By them, of course. "I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself," I said sharply, my patience wearing thin. Of course, she backtracked smoothly. "We just want what's best for you. Perhaps it's time you considered downsizing. A smaller place, less upkeep. You could use the extra money, couldn't you?" The audacity of it stunned me. She was circling my house like a vulture, already eyeing the spoils. "My finances are none of your concern," I retorted, my voice tight. "Now, if you'll excuse me," I started to hang up, but Silana's voice stopped me. "Wait, there's something else. Julian and I were discussing it, and well, we think it might be beneficial for everyone if you came to stay with us for a while. Just a short visit, of course. To recuperate. Recuperate from what?" the poison whiskey she'd sent me. I felt a cold fury building inside me. This wasn't about my well-being. It was about control, about getting me under their roof, where they could control my finances. Worse, the thought sent a shiver down my spine. I appreciate the offer, I said, my voice deceptively calm, but I have no intention of staying with you or of selling my house. There was a brief silence on the other end. Then Silana's tone shifted, the sweetness replaced by a thin veneer of ice. Suit yourself, she said coldly, but don't come crying to us when things get difficult. We've offered our help, and you've rejected it. Just remember that. The line went dead. I stood there, phone clutched in my hand, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but something else was beginning to emerge. A quiet resolve. They thought they could intimidate me, manipulate me, push me out of my own home. They had underestimated me. I wouldn't be bullied. I wouldn't be silenced. I would uncover what they were up to, and I would make them pay. I walked over to the liquor cabinet and stared at the bottle of whiskey, its amber liquid gleaming innocently in the lamplight. I picked it up, the weight of it unsettling. This wasn't just a gift. It was a weapon, and I needed to know how it worked. Carefully, I poured the remaining whiskey down the sink, watching as it swirled down the drain. Then, I rinsed the bottle thoroughly, removing any trace of its contents. I wrapped it in a towel and placed it in a box, ready to be taken to a lab for analysis. This was just the beginning. I had a feeling there was much more to this story than a simple bottle of poison whiskey, and I intended to find out everything. My gaze drifted to a framed photo on the mantelpiece. It was a picture of me and my late husband, taken on our last family vacation. We looked happy, carefree. A pang of sadness shot through me, followed by a surge of determination. I wouldn't let them tarnish his memory or steal what we had built together. I would protect our legacy, no matter the cost. The first step was to understand why. Why would Silana and Julian want to harm me? What were they hoping to gain? I had a feeling the answer lay within the walls of their own home. And that's where I would go next. The phone's shrill ring sliced through the quiet of my evening. It was Matias, his voice tight with panic. "Mom, something terrible has happened. Silana's mother, she collapsed. After she drank the whiskey." My heart lurched. "Collapsed? What do you mean collapsed? Is she all right?" Matias's voice cracked. "She's in the hospital. They're saying it might be poisoning." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Poisoning. My mind raced. The whiskey. But how? I stammered. The bottle Silana had gifted me flashing before my eyes. "That's what they think," Matias choked out. "They're running tests now." I sank into a chair, the room spinning. Silana's mother, a kind, gentle woman I'd always enjoyed talking to, lying in a hospital bed, possibly fighting for her life. And the whiskey, my birthday gift from Silana. "I don't understand," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I gave Silana's parents a bottle. They opened it right away," Matias interrupted. That's the one. Mom, they think it was poisoned." A cold dread washed over me. Poisoned. The word echoed in my mind. A chilling accusation. "They suspect me?" I asked. The questioner wound. Matias hesitated. They don't know. The police are involved now. They want to talk to everyone who had contact with the bottle. My own son, my own flesh and blood, relaying the news that I was a suspect in a potential attempted murder. The thought was unbearable. Of course, I managed, my voice trembling. I'll cooperate fully. I hung up the phone, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. How could this have happened? Silana had given me the whiskey. She'd presented it with such warmth, such apparent affection. Happy birthday, Lydia. It's a rare vintage. Just like you, she'd said, her smile wide and genuine. Now, that same bottle might have nearly killed her own mother. The pieces didn't fit. Why would Silana poison her own mother? It made no sense. Unless a terrifying thought crept into my mind. Unless it wasn't meant for her mother. Unless it was meant for me. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Silana had given me a poisoned bottle of whiskey. She'd intended for me to drink it. To do what? To get sick? To die? The implications were staggering. Why would Silana want to hurt me? I'd always tried to be welcoming, to treat her like the daughter I'd never had. I'd opened my home to her, to Matias. I'd even considered helping them financially, even though their constant requests for money were becoming a strain. Had that been my mistake? Had my generosity been misinterpreted, twisted into something sinister? I paced the length of my living room, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and fear. I thought back to Silana's settled digs about my estate, about how much it would be worth someday. It must be nice to have such a substantial inheritance to leave behind. She'd commented once, her eyes lingering on the antique gold watch I'd inherited from my father. At the time, I dismissed it as harmless envy. Now, those words echoed in my ears, laced with a chilling new meaning. The police would be here soon. I needed to be calm, to be rational. I needed to think. I needed to figure out why Silana would do this, and I needed to prove my innocence. My gaze fell upon the untouched bottle of wine I'd opened earlier that evening, intending to celebrate my birthday. I hadn't had a chance to drink any of it before the phone call. A sudden thought struck me. Maybe this was my chance. A small, flickering ember of hope ignited within me. Perhaps this was the key to uncovering the truth, to exposing Silana's deceit. I had to act quickly, before the police arrived, before they could contaminate the scene. This wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. This was about survival. This was about fighting back. The antiseptic smell of Charleston General Hospital stung my nostrils, a sharp contrast to the sweet, sickly scent of the whiskey that now clung to my memory. Basilia, my own mother, lay still in the crisp white bed, hooked up to machines that beeped and whirred. A constant, unsettling rhythm. She's stable, the doctor had told me just moments before, his voice calm, but his eyes grave. But the toxin, it was a close call. A close call. Those words echoed in my mind, a chilling reminder of how close I'd come to losing her, and how close I had come to. I pulled up a chair, the plastic cold against my skin. Basilia's face was pale, her breathing shallow. I reached out, hesitant at first, then gently took her hand in mine. It was limp and cool. "Mama," I whispered, my voice thick with unshed tears. "Please wake up." Hours crawled by. The rhythmic beeping of the machines became a soundtrack to my anxiety. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting for drips, murmuring quiet reassurances. but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. This wasn't just a random illness. This was deliberate. Mrs. Moreno, a nurse's voice startled me. Your mother is showing signs of improvement. She's regaining consciousness. Relief washed over me, so potent it almost made me weak. I rushed to Basilia's side. Her eyelids fluttered open, revealing cloudy, confused eyes. "Mama," I said, my voice trembling. "Lydia," she croaked, her voice barely a whisper. What happened? "You were sick, Mama. Very sick." I smoothed back a strand of hair from her forehead. "But you're going to be all right now." As Basilia slowly regained her strength, she began to piece together the events of the previous evening. She'd been celebrating my birthday with me, a quiet evening at her home. Silana, my daughter-in-law, had sent a bottle of what she claimed was top-shelf whiskey as a gift. Such a thoughtful gesture, Basilia had said, admiring the ornate bottle. "Silana has such good taste." We'd shared a glass, toasting to my health and happiness. Basilia had taken a larger sip than I had, savoring the supposed quality of the whiskey. It hadn't tasted quite right to me, a slightly bitter aftertaste that lingered on my tongue. I'd only taken a small sip, thankfully. Within minutes, Basilia had started to feel ill, dizziness, nausea, then a sudden, sharp pain in her chest. I'd called 911, my heart pounding with fear as I watched her collapse. Now, as Basilia recounted these details, a cold dread settled in my stomach. The whiskey. It had to be the whiskey. "The bottle," I said slowly, a horrifying realization dawning on me. Silana's gift. Basilia's brow furrowed. "What about it?" she asked, her voice weak. I think it was poisoned." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Basilia's eyes widened in disbelief. "Poisoned? But why?" she whispered. "Who would do such a thing?" My mind raced. Why would Silana send a poisoned bottle of whiskey? And why would she address it to me, only for my mother to drink most of it? A sudden, chilling thought pierced through the fog in my mind. The inheritance, my estate. It was all supposed to go to my son, Matias, Silana's husband. But I had been considering making some changes to my will, ensuring a portion went directly to my grandchildren, bypassing Matias altogether. He had been struggling with debt lately, and I'd heard whispers of gambling problems. I'd wanted to protect the children's future. Had Silana overheard something? Had they planned this together? The idea that my own son, my flesh and blood, could be involved in such a scheme was almost unbearable, but the pieces were starting to fit. The expensive whiskey, a seemingly generous gift, but in reality a deadly weapon, sent to me but consumed by my mother, a tragic accident, or a carefully calculated move. I looked at Basilia, her frail body a stark reminder of the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just about inheritance anymore. This was about justice. This was about protecting my family from the venomous greed that threatened to destroy us. "I'll find out who did this, Mama," I said, my voice firm. "I promise you, I'll find out the truth." A flicker of determination shone in Basilia's tired eyes. "Be careful, Lydia," she whispered. "They're dangerous." Her words resonated deep within me, a warning I couldn't ignore. I kissed her hand, feeling the fragility of her bones beneath my skin. As I left the hospital room, the sterile scent of the hospital seemed to fade, replaced by the metallic tang of resolve. I had a lot of digging to do, and I wouldn't rest until I uncovered every last secret. The thought of confronting Silana and Matias, of facing the truth, filled me with a mixture of dread and a strange, steely calm. There was more to this than met the eye, much more, and I was determined to find out what it was, no matter the cost. My gaze hardened. This wasn't just a family matter anymore. This was war. Charleston General Hospital buzzed with a low, persistent hum, the kind that vibrates through you, a constant reminder of sickness and worry. I sat stiffly in the uncomfortable plastic chair, the antiseptic smell of the waiting area heavy in the air. My sister, Alara, paced back and forth, her phone clutched in her hand. "Any news?" she asked, her voice tight with anxiety. I shook my head, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Just hours ago, my mother had been laughing, enjoying the birthday whiskey Silana and Matias had sent. Now, she lay unconscious in a hospital bed, hooked up to machines, her life hanging in the balance. Detective Aldama, a man with kind eyes that didn't quite match his stern demeanor, approached us. He pulled up a chair, the scraping sound grating on my already frayed nerves. "Mrs. Lydia," he began, his voice low and serious. "We have the preliminary results back from the lab." My heart pounded in my chest, and I managed to croak out, "The whiskey," he said, pausing, his gaze locking onto mine, contained a significant amount of poison. Alara gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. "Poison," she echoed, her voice trembling. I felt a cold dread wash over me. Poison. Someone had deliberately tried to kill my mother. "What kind of poison?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. Detective Aldama hesitated. "It's a complex compound," he explained, "not something readily available. We're working on identifying it precisely." He looked at me, his eyes searching. "Mrs. Lydia," he continued, "did your mother have any enemies? Anyone who might want to harm her?" The question felt like a punch to the gut. Enemies? My mother was the kindest, most generous person I knew. She wouldn't hurt a fly. "No," I said firmly. "Absolutely not." Alara nodded in agreement. "Mom is loved by everyone," she added. Detective Aldama's expression remained unchanged. "We need to consider all possibilities," he said gently. "Did she receive any unusual gifts recently? Anything out of the ordinary? The whiskey, Silana and Matias's thoughtful birthday gift, the elegant bottle, the expensive label. It had seemed like such a generous gesture. Now it felt sinister, a cruel trick disguised as kindness. She received a bottle of whiskey for her birthday," I said slowly, the words tasting like ash in my mouth, "from her son, Matias, and his wife, Silana." Detective Aldama's eyebrows rose slightly. "Do you have any reason to suspect them?" he asked, his tone carefully neutral. I hesitated. Silana had always been distant, cool. There had been an underlying tension between us, a subtle disapproval that I couldn't quite put my finger on. But to poison my mother, surely not. "No," I said again, though the word felt less certain now. "I can't imagine why they would do such a thing." But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it was growing, twisting its roots around my heart, choking the air from my lungs. "We'll need to speak with them, of course," Detective Aldama said, breaking the heavy silence. He stood up, his expression grim. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Lydia," he said, his voice softened with genuine sympathy. "This is a difficult situation. We'll do everything we can to find out who is responsible." He left us then, disappearing into the bustling hallway. I sat there numb, staring at the sterile white walls. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. The whiskey, the poison, Silana. It felt like a nightmare, a twisted, distorted version of reality. Alara put her hand on my shoulder, her touch warm and comforting. "It's going to be okay," she murmured, though her voice lacked conviction. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her, but a deep, unsettling fear was taking root, whispering insidious doubts into my ear. What if Silana was involved? What if she had deliberately tried to harm my mother? The thought was unbearable, a betrayal so profound it made my stomach churn. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the fear, the confusion, the gnawing suspicion. I needed to be strong. I needed to be there for my mother, for my family, and I needed to find out the truth, no matter how painful it might be. As I sat there, the hum of the hospital fading into the background, a quiet resolve began to form within me. I would uncover the truth. I would find out who poisoned my mother, and I would make them pay. This wasn't just about my mother anymore. It was about justice. It was about protecting my family. And it was about exposing the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of our seemingly perfect lives. This was just the beginning. I knew deep down that my life, our lives, would never be the same. The comfortable world we had known was shattered, replaced by a chilling reality where betrayal and deceit lurked in the shadows, and I was ready to face it. I had to, for my mother, for myself, and for the future of my family. There was a glimmer, a faint spark of something else, to the promise of reclaiming what was rightfully ours. And that thought, though small, gave me the strength to keep going. The low hum of the refrigerator in Matias's kitchen was the only sound as I carefully sifted through the papers scattered across his desk. Silana had been insistent that I not disturb anything, her voice tight with a false concern. "Matias is so particular about his things, Lydia," she'd said, her hand fluttering near her perfectly coiffed hair. "He'd be so upset if he thought someone had been going through his private things." But Silana's thinly veiled warning only solidified my resolve. Something wasn't right, and I needed to know what it was. The desk, a cheap, particle board affair, was surprisingly cluttered. Receipts for fast food littered the surface, crumpled alongside utility bills and unopened bank statements. I picked up a crumpled piece of paper, smoothing it out. It was a final notice for a loan payment. The amount circled in angry red ink. My stomach tightened. Matias had never mentioned having financial difficulties. He had a stable job, a decent income. Why was he defaulting on a loan? I sifted further, finding more overdue notices, some for credit cards I didn't even know he had. The amounts owed were staggering. How could my son have gotten himself into this kind of mess? I lifted a stack of papers, revealing a small, leather-bound notebook underneath. My heart pounded as I opened it. The pages were filled with hurried, almost frantic handwriting Matias's. It detailed a series of increasingly desperate loan applications, each one rejected. Beside one entry, scrolled in the margin, were the words, "Julian says he can help." Julian, Silana's fiancé, a slick, overly charming man I'd never quite trusted. He'd always seemed too eager to please, his smile a little too wide, his compliments a little too lavish. I'd initially dismissed my unease as a mother's natural protectiveness, but now these scribbled words in my son's notebook painted a disturbing picture. What kind of help was Julian offering, and at what cost? A small, folded piece of paper tucked into the back of the notebook caught my eye. I unfolded it carefully. It was a contract, the terms outlined in dense legal jargon. I scanned the document, my blood chilling as I absorbed the contents. It was a loan agreement between Matias and Julian for a substantial sum of money. The interest rate was exorbitant, bordering on criminal, but what truly stole my breath was the collateral. Matias had put up his share of my estate as collateral for the loan. My estate, the one I'd intended to divide equally between my children upon my death. The one Silana had been so subtly, so insidiously, trying to pry from my grasp. It all clicked into place. The poisoned whiskey, the seemingly innocent concern, the constant subtle jabs about my age and my failing health. They hadn't been trying to kill me, not exactly. They'd been trying to bankrupt Matias, knowing he would turn to Julian for help. And Julian, the ever-helpful fiancé, had been waiting in the wings, ready to ensnare him in a predatory loan, securing a claim to my estate. A wave of nausea washed over me. I sank into the chair, the weight of their betrayal crushing me, my own son, caught in their web of deceit. I closed my eyes, trying to regain my composure. I had to think clearly. I had to protect Matias, even from himself. But how I stood up, my legs shaky, and began carefully replacing the papers exactly as I'd found them. I couldn't let them know I was onto them. Not yet. I needed more evidence, more concrete proof. I needed to know the extent of their scheme and how far they were willing to go. As I closed the notebook, a small, almost imperceptible glint of metal caught my eye. Tucked inside the cover, barely visible, was a tiny memory card. My heart quickened. This could be it. This could be the key to unraveling everything. With trembling hands, I carefully removed the card and slipped it into my pocket. I glanced around the room one last time, ensuring everything was back in its place. Then, taking a deep breath, I walked out of Matias's study, a sense of grim determination settling over me. They thought they had won. They thought they had me cornered. But they were wrong. I was just getting started. I would uncover the truth, and I would make them pay for what they had done. The game, as they say, was far from over, and I had a feeling the stakes were about to get much higher. The thought of their faces when I revealed their treachery sent a shiver of anticipation down my spine. They underestimated me. They underestimated a mother's love and a mother's wrath, and that, I realized, would be their undoing. The upcoming holiday season, a time for family and togetherness, would be anything but for Silana and Julian. They were about to learn a very expensive lesson. The stale air of Matias's garage hung heavy with the smell of motor oil and something faintly sweet, almost cloying. I hesitated at the threshold, a knot tightening in my stomach. "This is wrong," I muttered to myself, pushing the door open further. Boxes overflowed with discarded toys, sporting equipment long abandoned, and dusty holiday decorations. Silana never was one for sentiment, I thought, recalling the curt way she'd dismissed my offer to store some of these childhood treasures in my attic. "It's just stuff," she'd said, her tone dismissive. "Matias doesn't need it anymore." The memory stung, even now. Sunlight slanted through a grimy window, illuminating a stack of crates tucked away in the far corner. Something about their uniformity caught my eye. They weren't the usual haphazard assortment of storage containers one would expect in a garage. These were identical, brand new, and stamped with a distillery logo, the same distillery that produced the whiskey Silana had gifted me, the whiskey that had nearly killed me. My heart hammered against my ribs. "This can't be," I whispered, a cold dread washing over me. I approached the crates cautiously, my hand trembling as I reached for the top one. It was surprisingly heavy. I pried it open, the wood groaning in protest. Inside, nestled amongst layers of packing straw, were rows of whiskey bottles, identical to the one Silana had given me. My breath hitched. "Oh my God," I breathed, my voice barely audible. I reached for one, my fingers brushing against the cool glass. It felt wrong, heavier somehow than the bottle I remembered. I grabbed another crate, then another, each revealing the same chilling contents. Dozens, maybe hundreds of bottles of the same expensive whiskey. "What is going on?" I murmured, my mind reeling. Why would Matias, a struggling artist, have a garage full of top-shelf liquor? He couldn't afford a single bottle, let alone crates of it. The distillery logo seemed to mock me, a constant reminder of my near-death experience. The burning sensation in my throat, the fear that gripped me as I struggled to breathe. Suddenly, a glint of metal caught my eye, protruding from beneath a loose flap of cardboard. In one of the crates was a small, unlabeled vial. My hand shook as I reached for it, my heart pounding in my ears. I unscrewed the cap carefully, bringing the vial to my nose. The sweet, cloying scent intensified, now mingled with something else, something sharp and chemical. It was the same smell that had permeated the whiskey Silana had given me, the smell I had initially dismissed as part of the drink's complex aroma. I recoiled, dropping the vial back into the crate as if it were burning hot. This isn't just whiskey," I whispered, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. "It's the same poison." The image of Silana's smug smile flashed before my eyes. The casual way she had handed me the bottle, telling me how much she'd enjoyed choosing it for me. "You deserve to treat yourself, Lydia," she'd said. The words echoed in my mind, now dripping with a chilling new meaning. Panic threatened to overwhelm me. I had to get out of there, to tell someone, to do something. But as I turned to leave, another thought stopped me in my tracks. If Matias had access to this poison whiskey, then was he involved? Had he been complicit in Silana's plan all along? The thought was a sickening betrayal, a knife twisting in my gut. My own son. Could he really have been a part of this? My gaze fell back on the crates of whiskey, the sunlight glinting off the glass, transforming them into a macabre display of deceit and betrayal. This wasn't just about the inheritance anymore. This was about something far more sinister, something that struck at the very heart of my family. "I won't let her get away with this," I whispered, a steely resolve hardening my voice. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice, about protecting what little remained of my family. I needed proof, hard evidence that would expose Silana and uncover the truth. No matter how painful it might be, I carefully picked up the vial, wrapping it in a handkerchief and tucking it into my purse. This small, unassuming vial held the key to everything, the answer to the question that had been haunting me. Why? Why would Silana, or anyone, want to hurt me? I had to find out, and I wouldn't rest until I did. The garage door creaked open, revealing a sliver of the street outside. I slipped out, my heart pounding, the vial a heavy weight in my pocket. It was time to put my plan into action. Sunlight slanted through the dusty blinds of the guest room, painting stripes across the worn rug. I'd told Matias and Silana I needed a nap, retreating to this room after lunch. But sleep was the last thing on my mind. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. Their forced cheerfulness, the quick glances they exchanged when they thought I wasn't looking, something felt wrong. "Are you sure you're all right, Mom?" Silana had asked, a little too sweetly. "You seem a bit pale." I'd waved it off, attributing it to the lingering shock of the near tragedy with my mother. But the suspicion lingered. The walls of this house felt thinner than they used to, sound traveling through the vents and under the doors. As I lay there, feigning sleep, muffled voices drifted from the living room. It was Matias and Silana. At first, it was just murmurs, the low rumble of conversation I couldn't quite decipher. Then Silana's voice, sharp and clear, cut through the quiet. "Are you sure this is the only way?" I held my breath, straining to hear Matias's reply. He mumbled something I couldn't catch. "We have to be careful," he said, his voice louder now, edged with a nervous energy I recognized. "What if someone finds out?" "They won't," Silana retorted, her voice laced with an unsettling confidence. "Who would suspect us?" My heart pounded in my chest. Suspect them of what? The question hung heavy in the air, thick with unspoken implications. I eased myself closer to the door, pressing my ear against the cool wood. But the whiskey Matias began, his voice trailing off. He sounded hesitant, almost fearful. "It was perfect," Silana hissed, "almost too perfect." She paused. "Except your mother survived." My blood ran cold. The whiskey, my mother. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. The gift, Silana's over-solicitous concern. My mother's sudden illness, it wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. Without her house, we're nothing. Silana continued, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "The creditors are circling Matias. We're drowning in debt." A chilling laugh escaped her lips. "But soon, everything will be ours." Matias's response was barely audible. "I still don't like this," he muttered. "It's wrong." "Wrong?" Silana scoffed. "It's survival. Don't you see? It's her or us. And I choose us." The knot in my stomach twisted tighter, a cold dread spreading through me. My own son, my Matias, involved in this plot against me. I wanted to burst through the door, confront them with their treachery. But something held me back. A cold, hard resolve began to take root within me. I needed proof, concrete evidence. I needed to know the extent of their betrayal. They continued to talk, their voices a low murmur punctuated by Silana's sharp, insistent tones. I listened, memorizing every word, every inflection, every damning detail. They discussed their mounting debts, the pressure from creditors, their desperation. They talked about my estate, my house, my assets, as if they were already theirs. They even spoke of Julian, Silana's fiancé, praising his supposed support and understanding, completely oblivious to the fact that he'd confided in me weeks ago about Silana's relentless pressure to secure my assets. He'd been worried, unsure how to navigate her increasingly insistent demands. Now, hearing him mentioned in this context, a new layer of unease settled over me. Was Julian truly as innocent as he seemed, or was he playing a deeper game? My mind raced, piecing together fragments of conversations, seemingly innocuous comments, gestures I dismissed as insignificant. The lavish birthday dinner Silana had insisted on hosting, the expensive bottle of wine she'd brought, the way she'd hovered over me, constantly refilling my glass. It had all been a performance, a carefully orchestrated charade. They went quiet for a long moment, and I held my breath, fearing they'd realized I was awake. Then Silana spoke again, her voice low and urgent. "We need to be smarter this time," she said. "No more mistakes. We need a plan B, a plan B." The words echoed in my mind, sending a shiver down my spine. What fresh horrors did they have in store for me? I had to get out of this house. I needed to gather my thoughts, formulate a plan of my own. Slowly, carefully, I rose from the bed, my legs trembling slightly. I crept to the window, peering out at the quiet street below. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the lawns, the air still and heavy with the promise of a summer storm. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead. This wasn't just about my survival anymore. It was about exposing their treachery, bringing them to justice. The naive, trusting mother they thought they knew was gone. In her place stood a woman fueled by a quiet fury, a woman determined to protect what was hers and to make them pay for what they had done. I slipped out of the guest room, leaving the door slightly ajar, and quietly made my way downstairs, my mind already working, plotting my next move. The game, it seemed, was far from over. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across my living room carpet. I paced, the chemist's report clutched in my hand, the weight of its contents pressing down on me more than any physical burden. "I can't believe it," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. My own son, Matias, and Silana. They'd tried to. I couldn't even bring myself to think the word. The report confirmed my worst fears. The whiskey had been laced with a slow-acting poison, undetectable to the untrained palate, enough to cause gradual organ failure, mimicking a natural decline, enough to kill. They wanted me dead, I said aloud, the reality of it finally sinking in. My hands trembled. The silence of the house pressed in, amplifying the turmoil within me. A sudden wave of nausea washed over me. I stumbled to the sofa, the report falling onto the cushions beside me. My mind raced, replaying every interaction with Silana, every seemingly innocent gesture, every forced smile. "Just a little something for your birthday, Mother," she'd said, her eyes gleaming with a false sweetness that now chilled me to the bone. The memory of her handing me the beautifully wrapped bottle of whiskey, the elaborate bow, the feigned concern for my well-being, it all felt like a cruel joke. A joke that could have cost me my life. I picked up the phone, my fingers fumbling with the keypad. "Hello, Inspector Davis," I said, my voice shaking. "I have something you need to see, something that will change everything." He agreed to meet me at my home within the hour. I spent the intervening time gathering my thoughts, trying to piece together the puzzle of their motive. Why would they do this? What had I ever done to deserve such betrayal? The doorbell rang, jolting me from my reverie. Inspector Davis stood on my doorstep, his expression grim. "Mrs. Lydia," he said, stepping inside. "What is it you wanted to show me?" I handed him the chemist's report, my heart pounding in my chest. He read it carefully, his brow furrowing with each passing line. "This is disturbing," he said finally, looking up at me. "Are you certain about this?" "Absolutely certain," I replied, my voice firm. "I also have reason to believe that my son, Matias, and his wife, Silana, are responsible." I explained my suspicions, detailing the financial difficulties Matias had been facing, the exorbitant lifestyle he and Silana maintained, and the fact that I was the sole beneficiary of a substantial estate. They stood to inherit everything if I were to pass away unexpectedly, I said, the words heavy with unspoken grief. Inspector Davis listened intently, asking clarifying questions, taking notes. "This is serious, Mrs. Lydia," he said. "We need to gather more evidence. Do you have the bottle of whiskey?" I led him to the kitchen, where I had carefully stored the remaining contents in a sealed container, and anything else that might be relevant. He asked. My mind flashed back to the day I had searched Matias's and Silana's home, the seemingly innocent purchase receipts for expensive jewelry, the cryptic notes hinting at mounting debts, the hastily deleted internet searches for untraceable poisons. I had documented everything. I retrieved the file I had compiled, handing it over to Inspector Davis. "This might be helpful," I said. He flipped through the pages, his eyes widening with each new piece of evidence. "This is more than helpful, Mrs. Lydia," he said. "This is damning." He assured me that he would take immediate action, and that Matias and Silana would be brought in for questioning. As he left, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal, it was all still there, raw and pulsating beneath the surface. But now, there was also a glimmer of something else, a sense of resolve, a sense of justice. I had been wronged, deeply wronged, but I would not be broken. I would not let their greed and deceit destroy me. I would fight for my life, for my family, for the truth. The fight, I knew, was far from over, but I was ready. I had protected myself, my estate, my hard-earned legacy would remain untouched by their grasping hands. I had plans for it, plans that would ensure its safety and, perhaps, bring some good into the world. Plans Silana and Matias would never know. And as I stood there, watching the last rays of sunlight fade from the sky, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of anticipation for what lay ahead. The game, I realized, had just begun. Sunlight streamed through the living room window, painting dust motes dancing in the air, but the brightness couldn't touch the chill in my heart. Several days had crawled by since I'd sent the whiskey sample to the lab, days punctuated by Silana's chirpy calls, feigning concern for my sudden aversion to her generous gift. I was just so worried. "Lydia," she'd said just yesterday, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Are you feeling any better?" "Better? How could I be better knowing what lurked beneath that sugary facade?" The phone rang, shattering the tense quiet. "Mrs. Alvarez," a crisp, official voice inquired. It was the lab. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Yes, speaking," I managed, my voice barely a whisper. "We've completed the analysis of the whiskey sample you provided," the technician continued, and I prompted, unable to bear the suspense a moment longer. He paused, then delivered the words that would forever alter the landscape of my family. It was deliberately contaminated with a potent, slow-acting poison, enough to be fatal. I sank into the nearest chair, the phone slipping from my numb fingers. Fatal. Silana had tried to kill me, my own daughter-in-law. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, stealing my breath. Why? The question echoed in my mind, a desperate plea for understanding. The lab technician's clinical explanation of the poison, the dosage, the likely effects, faded into the background noise of my swirling thoughts. It all pointed back to one thing: my estate. Silana, or perhaps Julian whispering in her ear, wanted me gone. They wanted the house, the land, everything I had worked my entire life to build. And my son, Matias, where did he fit into this twisted scheme? Had he been in on it from the start, or was he a pawn in Silana's game, blinded by love, or perhaps by his own mounting debts? I remembered his evasiveness, his nervous glances, the way he'd tried to steer me away from the whiskey that night. "Mom, maybe you should just stick to wine," he'd said, a little too forcefully. Had that been a warning, or a carefully crafted deflection? I closed my eyes, images of happier times flashing behind my eyelids. Moshe's as a boy, his infectious laughter filling the house, Silana's bright smile when they first announced their engagement. How had things gone so wrong? How had this beautiful, vibrant young woman I had welcomed into my family become a cold-blooded killer? The bitterness rose in my throat, choking me. I wouldn't let her win. I wouldn't let them steal everything I held dear. Silana's earlier words echoed in my mind, her feigned concern, her saccharine sympathy. It was all an act, a cruel, calculated performance designed to lull me into a false sense of security. But now the mask had slipped. I saw her for who she truly was, and I knew what I had to do. The lab technician was still speaking, outlining the next steps, the legal procedures, the possibility of pressing charges. I listened, barely registering his words. My mind was already racing ahead, formulating a plan to expose Silana and reclaim what was rightfully mine, a plan to ensure that justice, however delayed, would ultimately be served. The technician finished his report, offering his condolences. "I'm truly sorry, Mrs. Alvarez," he said, his voice laced with genuine sympathy. "Thank you," I replied, my voice steadier now, a new resolve hardening my tone. "But don't be sorry for me. Be sorry for Silana, because she has no idea what's coming." I hung up the phone, the setting sun casting long shadows across the room. The chill in the air was gone, replaced by a burning ember of determination. The game had changed, and I was ready to play. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Basilia's living room as I sat, numb, holding the small velvet box. Silana and Julian had left, their faces a mixture of confusion and something akin to fear. "I can't believe you would accuse us of something so horrible," Silana had said, her voice trembling. "We only wanted to celebrate your birthday." Her words echoed in my ears, hollow and unconvincing. Julian had remained silent, his eyes darting between Silana and me. Their hasty departure only solidified my suspicions. Inside the velvet box, nestled amongst the satin lining, lay a gold watch, identical to the one my husband, Elias, had worn every day until his death. It was a limited edition piece, a gift I'd given him for our anniversary. I knew Elias had only ever owned one. So how did Silana have another? Basilia, my oldest and dearest friend, placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "Lydia, are you all right?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. I'm not sure," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. "This doesn't make any sense." I opened the watch, my hand shaking slightly. Engraved on the back were the initials EM and a date, our wedding anniversary, the same inscription as Elias's watch. "Basilia, look at this," I said, handing her the watch. She examined it closely, her brow furrowing. "Where did Silana say she got this?" she asked, handing it back to me. "She claimed it was a gift from Julian's grandfather," I replied, my voice tight. But this is Elias's watch. I'd recognize it anywhere." Basilia looked at me, her eyes wide. "Are you saying—" "I don't know what to think," I interrupted, running a hand through my hair. "But I need to find out." My mind raced, piecing together the fragments of information I had. The poison whiskey, Silana's insistence on me drinking it, Julian's unusual silence, and now this watch. It all pointed in one direction. "I need to go home," I said, standing abruptly. "There's something I need to check." Basilia squeezed my hand. "Be careful, Lydia," she warned. "I will," I promised, already halfway out the door. The drive home felt like an eternity. My mind was a whirlwind of questions. If this watch truly was Elias's, where had Silana found it? And what did it mean? I parked the car in the driveway and hurried inside, the unsettling feeling in my gut growing stronger with each step. I went straight to Elias's study, a room I hadn't entered much since his passing. It remained largely untouched, a shrine to his memory. His books lined the shelves. His favorite chair sat empty by the fireplace. I went to his desk, the smooth mahogany surface gleaming in the dim light. I opened the top drawer, rummaging through the papers and trinkets he'd kept there. Pens, paper clips, a small magnifying glass, but no watch. My heart sank. Had I been wrong? Was this watch simply a replica? I opened the second drawer, and my breath caught in my throat. There, nestled amongst his cufflinks and tie clips, was a small, empty velvet box, identical to the one Silana had given me. I pulled it out, my fingers trembling. This was it. This was Elias's watch box. The watch Silana had given me, the one supposedly from Julian's grandfather, was in fact Elias's. But how did Silana get it? And why give it to me now, after trying to poison me? Suddenly, a chilling thought struck me. What if Silana hadn't intended to just poison me? What if she had planned to kill me, make it look like an accident, and then present the watch as a found item, a sentimental keepsake from my late husband? It was a twisted plan, but it fit. It explained everything. I sank into Elias's chair, the weight of the realization crushing me. My own daughter-in-law had tried to kill me. For what? For my estate. For the inheritance. The thought made me sick to my stomach. I closed my eyes, tears streaming down my face. I had lost Elias, and now I was losing my son and his wife to their greed. But then, a surge of anger coursed through me. I wouldn't let them win. I wouldn't let them get away with this. I would expose their lies. I would bring them to justice. I opened my eyes, a newfound resolve hardening my gaze. I picked up the phone and dialed the number of the private investigator I had hired after the incident with the whiskey. "I have something new," I said, my voice steady and clear. "Something that changes everything." I told him about the watch, about the identical boxes, about my suspicions. He listened intently, asking clarifying questions, his tone professional and reassuring. "I understand, Mrs. Moreno," he said finally. "This is significant. I'll start looking into it immediately." I thanked him and hung up, a small glimmer of hope flickering within me. This wasn't over. Not yet. I had the evidence I needed. Now, it was time for Silana and Julian to face the consequences of their actions. I stood up, the setting sun casting long shadows across the room. The fight wasn't over, but I was ready. I would reclaim what was mine, and I would get justice for Elias. The gold watch felt heavy in my hand, a symbol of both loss and the fight to come.